Hello everybody, this is the Vikstrand. So, today we're going to talk a little bit about Burt I. Gorton. He may not be one of the more recognizable names in the annals of Hollywood, but he's probably most famous for having the lengthiest career of all time. Started making movies in the 1950s and, didn't, retire until he made his last movie around 2015, 2016, when he was in his late 80s. It is freaking insane. He almost exclusively made bad movies, whether or not it was silly comedies, bad sci-fi movies, hokey fantasy movies, or bad horror movies. Today we're going to take a look at what I would probably consider his best movie. It doesn't make the movie good, it just makes it a little bit less horrendously bad than what his normal standard is, whether or not it is the horrible The Earth versus the Spider, Village of the Giants, or one of the worst movies of all time, King Dinosaur. We're gonna take a look at it and see if we can figure out if this is a decent movie or if it's just a coincidence that this is the best movie he has ever done. This is The Magic Sword. Number one in this movie's villain is played by one of my favorite bad guys in the history of Hollywood, Basil Rathbone, who gets top billing. He plays an evil sorcerer who has, kidnapped a princess for, checks note, some reason. And, we have this valiant knight who tries to get her back and, win her hand and, stuff like that. He loves this princess more than anything else in the world. And she is the love of his life because, he has creepily watched her through a, magic mirror or some bullshit like that. It doesn't really matter, it's stupid, but he's kind of cock-blocked by the introduction of, some side characters that go to accompany him, a Scottish knight, a Irish knight, a French knight, a German knight. I think there was a Spanish knight also, but I'm not entirely sure. He's also equipped with a magic shield and a magic sword that, some witches, given him who knew the sorcerer and wants, some payback and stuff like that. And he's going to try to use these magical weapons in order to, lift the 7 curses that protects the sorcerer's castle so he can get in there and, save the princess. That's essentially it. It is about as basic as you can get when it comes to fantasy movies. And the valiant knight with the knight equivalent of red shirts are experiencing some moderately fun adventures on their way to the castle. Considering that this is a Burt I. Gorton production from the 1960s, the special effects actually doesn't look too bad. It's not good, but it is not horrendously bad, even though that dragon looked absolutely cack. But at least they did have a dragon instead of, the dragonfly that is superimposed in the horrendously bad movie King Dinosaur and claiming that it was a dinosaur. It was a fucking dragonfly, you charlatan. So The Magic Sword, it is a pretty lame fantasy movie with some hokey acting, some bad writing and some pretty crappy effects, but it has some weird charm to it that still kind of makes me go, yeah, that's kind of fun, and you're kind of entertained by how crap it is, and Basil Rathbone seems to enjoy himself a lot, and sometimes that's all you need. It's very predictable, it's incredibly hokey, but it is at least never boring, and it never goes into that, horrendously awful territory that a lot of bad Burt I. Gorton movies goes. It's still not a very good movie, but considering how bad some of his other stuff is, this is a pretty decent movie, and I was surprised how good it was. One of the reasons why I give The Magic Sword 29 points is the fact that since this was a Burt I. Gorton movie, I thought that this was going to be absolutely horrendously awful. I thought that this was going to be a march through misery, and when it actually was kind of decent, I thought, well, this is kind of good. If I would have had below average expectations on this one, would it still gotten 29 points? We will never know. If you like cheesy fantasy movies in the Harryhausen tradition, I think you will find redeeming things about this movie, but for most other people who wants to have a cool fantasy movie, they will say, well, this is kind of silly and kind of lame and kind of bad. But it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. So I'll see you next time from so-and-so reviewing, such and such. Thank you for watching. Thank you very much.